So, as we know, there are so many impacts of racism, and one is that it can impact on our mental health. Although there are many different ways in which racism can affect mental health, in this particular video, I thought I'd touch on a few of the more hidden ways and some of the ways that we wouldn't necessarily think about, just so we can learn to better support ourselves or support the Black people in our lives. One of the things that may come up is intergenerational trauma. So this is something that can be deep within the structure of a family, and it can be really present and really prominent, or it can be actually quite subconscious. So I've had a lot of conversations with my parents about this. I've unfortunately only got one grandparent remaining, and he's in Barbados, so I haven't been able to talk to him much about it, and also probably it'd be quite upsetting for him. But for those who are in close contact with Black parents and grandparents, this time can be quite triggering for them. I know from speaking to my own mother, in one way she said, gosh, this is a sort of a fight that we're going to have to hand the baton to you. But at the same time, it's a fight she's still fighting. So even though she kind of wants to release and pass the baton, being the fact that she's a Black woman from the West Indies, she can't really do that. She's aware of it, she hears it, and it's going to bring up lots of different things for parents of older generation and grandparents. So I would say just check in on them, see how they're getting on, and just be open and supportive if they need a little bit of extra help. Another way in which racism impacts on mental health is a feeling of powerless. So now we're talking about the system of oppression, and that has been sort of broadcast on a major scale. Many people would have been aware that this existed, but many people weren't. And even if we were aware, it can be quite challenging and confronting to be so sort of made aware of it in this way. So many people are feeling like they're super powerless at the moment. So it might be things like, you can be a good person, you can be a kind person, you can be a law-abiding person, but still, we're at risk of these things. Or you can be the best for the job, you can be the most clever person, you can be the hardest working, but still you're faced with this system. So many Black people may be feeling a real sense of powerless at the moment. So I would advise in those situations just to figure out what you can control. So for example, the sectors which I work in, well-being, mental health and education, are massive sectors, and they're areas which, that marginalised groups are really impacted negatively. Sometimes it's felt almost overwhelming, like there's nothing I can do to even scratch the surface, but I'll try and do things where I can. So obviously I have my platform, I'll promote here, and also I'll support friends and families maybe to write letters to their schools or their children's schools, and just small steps to figure out what I can do to make control and what I can do to help myself feel more empowered. So I think that's really important. Another way in which mental health can be impacted is a feeling of hopelessness, because sometimes when you're receiving this barrage of information, especially where I am in the UK, where we've had riots and really violent threats and aggression towards Black people, it can feel quite hopeless, particularly in the backdrop of a pandemic. And so for me, something that I would say is to start, or if we've got one already, continue on with the gratitude practice. Sometimes this drops off, and even I've found that myself when I've been under high levels of stress, but just reminding ourselves what we're grateful for on a daily basis, things that we're grateful for from that day, really can help to anchor us down. So even though this situation is extremely stressful, and I'm not denying it, thank God there are still things that can make us feel joy in every day, even if it's a cup of tea and a biscuit, or a chat with a loved one, or watching a silly film, or something funny on Netflix. There are still things that we can find joy in and gratitude for in every day. So I think returning to that, listing 3 to 5 things every single either morning or evening that you feel grateful for, is a really good way to sort of counteract those feelings of hopelessness. I would also say fear. So I think that's one that gets overlooked actually, because when I've been speaking to members of my community, I've had things like people being fearful to leave their house, people having nightmares about loved ones, people being paranoid about letting family members go out. I know I had that experience myself when my partner went to a particularly racist area, or what's known as a racist area, should we say, and he didn't make it, he wasn't back in time. I got really panicked, and that's only been recently since the Black Lives Matters movement. So I think we can counteract the fear in terms of reassuring ourselves and trying to have a practical lens of what's real and what's not real. But at the end of the day, there are things that are legitimate safety concerns at the moment. So I would say, think about safety planning. Think about what makes you feel safe. Think about talking to your families about these things. Think about creating a safe word so you can message each other if you ever feel uncomfortable or in danger. And just having those there, most likely and thankfully we'll never have to use them. But I think safety planning is a really, really positive way to empower yourself in the face of something that feels frightening. So I thought I would just share these 4 ones because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think the impact can be sometimes hidden or overlooked. So hopefully this will help you to support yourselves if you're Black, if you're a person of colour, or support the Black loved ones in your life.